I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Darren. Very happy to be your host. We have a lot going on this morning, so I wanted to start just a few minutes early. Everybody, wait a minute. Shout out to Vibe Band. Greetings to all the remixers who will be here live. Those who will see and hear this later, peace and welcome to you as well. Welcome, Rashid is a new member to the channel. So I'm going to see if I can just adjust this a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to let that keep rocking. But I wanted to start a few minutes early, though, because there's a couple things I wanted to get to before we get to our guests. We have a packed show, and we need all the time possible first to pay tribute to Kwame Nkrumah and then get into the Woman King film. Spoiler alert. So just FYI, if you don't want spoilers, check out after the Kwame Nkrumah discussion and come back later. If you don't care or if you've seen the film, please do stick around. I'll get into the stuff with my tech issues in my background later on. I don't want to take too much time with that. It's been a little bit of drama, a little bit of adjustments necessary, but we're here nonetheless. I do want to remind everybody once again that we are continuing on with our BPM fall fundraiser. So please do, if you can, jump in and support our channel in this way. If you haven't already, if you don't already feel overstretched, I'm putting the link in the chat again, but and I'll have it in the show description if it's not already there. But definitely want to encourage people to continue to support that fundraiser. Shout out to Vibe Band, though, and to my middle remix of Mark Anthony's. This joint, I love it. I love it. I could listen to it all day. Makes my mood better immediately. That pocket and just that attitude. Yeah, we're gonna smile. We're gonna dance, and then we're gonna hit you with these pockets and these beats, these polyrhythms. All right. Anyway, so I definitely want to get to that too. I see my man, Dr. Burrows. You're not slated till 9:00 for the Woman King conversation, but you're welcome to join us for Kwame Nkrumah. Stick around. I'll get to you in a second. So that's one thing. I want to again encourage people to support the Discord. Link in the show description, and continue to put guest suggestions and criticisms in there. Shout out to Josh and Aaliyah who have been checking that and working with that as well. So please do jump in there and do that as well. Okay, good. Working with it. We working with it a little bit. All right. A little bit of just got this sent to me this morning and wanted to quickly mention it. I'm sure throughout the week and the platform we'll get into this story a little more, but something somewhat relevant, very relevant to what we'll be talking about this morning. Folks who've been following this have been raising an eyebrow to this, so we just want to note that we're seeing this story and we want to continue to support and follow it. Ferguson activist Darren Seals was surveilled by FBI files show. So as we talk later on this morning about the impact of the state on a variety of Pan-African endeavors, this is one thing we want to continue to note. And am I freezing now? Wow. Anyway, let me see if I can keep working through this. I'm not sure if this is actually working or not. Just quickly, according to the report, at one point, Seals was investigatively detained during a traffic stop conducted by the police at the request of the FBI. And one other thing that I noted that was of interest to me in this story, I think I'm having some issues here this morning. Yeah, I think there's something. My bad, everybody. Anyway, what I noticed was that the FBI had initiated the police to stopping him, to surveilling him, and to questioning Darren Seals. So we'll continue to try to monitor that and come back to that story later. But this idea that this spooky thing again, reminiscent, of course, of Fred Hampton, where the police locally are behaving at the behest of the national state police, the FBI, and intervening, and people who are under that surveillance end up mysteriously dying without witnesses, etc. So that's something that we want to definitely encourage people. We want to support the continued reporting on that as well. And then one more thing very quickly before we get to the serious business of the day. And I'm going to beg everybody's forgiveness, but I think this is actually, I'm going to pause the music because I want to be, but I want to take a second and play this clip because I think this says a lot about what I've been arguing about media, about the role of BPM, about it's related to my buying power argument and so much more. And again, as much as we do admittedly have a little bit of fun with our dear brother here, Roland Martin, this is not really about him per se. And I just want you to hear what he is saying on his recent MSNBC hit, and the way he ends up framing what is apparently this black radical call to action. So I just want just check this out a little bit.
Resonates with black men when you represent strength. Why do black men respond to Minister Louis Farrakhan? It is strength, not weakness. Now, you can say it's policy, you can say it's crazy, but if I need to understand the psychosis of the individual to understand why they might vote someone in order for me to reach them. So we're talking about how to reach them. I remember in 2016 telling Hillary Clinton to her face, you have a black male problem. Where are your black male surrogates? Well, what about the CBC? I said, no. Why? I said, where are the black men? You must send black men talking to black men because we have a different conversation.
That's neo-colonial approach to electoral politics with the Democratic Party.
So if you don't do that, then you are going to lose. Stacey has a great platform, but she needs black male surrogates out.
Who? Like, who are some people who could be like great surrogates for her?
Well,
because it can't always be politicians. Like sometimes it needs to be the local the barbershop owner, the exec, the courtroom, the corporate office exec. Sorry, Cliff, were you trying to say something?
Yeah. No, I think Roland's got an excellent point. I think there's been a whole thing talking about Herschel Walker and how he can't tell the truth and how much he lies. And there's a segment of the black male.
And forgive me, everybody. This is just another minute or so here. There is a payoff to my point here.
I'm just
there's a method to my madness.
That's the thing with Trump, right? So. But I think that we need the equivalent really to this point about surrogates. We need the equivalent of like what the WNBA and the Atlanta Dream did for Reverend Warnock. Keep in mind, he was low in the polls until the Dream started wearing his shirts, and that's really where he started to skyrocket. We need the equivalent of that, shouting out Warnock, but also poking holes in Herschel Walker, to really have him be as ridiculed within black male circles as like Dr. Oz is being ridiculed in Pennsylvania for his predatory or whatever. We need that kind of strategy, and we need those kinds of surrogates that can really point that out. I think people like Cedric and some others, like we need, if every black male comic just had a routine on Herschel, I think that would be enough right there.
But it's not just Georgia. It's Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin. It's Sherry Beasley, North Carolina. It's Gibbons in Florida. There has to be a strategy. And I'm going to keep saying it again. If you're not spending money on Black-owned media and you're not listening to Black people in the Democratic Party, and let me look at the camera, white strategists who controlling the money, you keep trying to chase those suburban voters, you're going to lose big. And so put the money where the people are.
All right.
Message.
I keep trying to tell you that's the contradiction right there. That's the thing. And that's what causes so many of the problems for us, I think, politically, as we try to organize. And that's creates so much of the buffer and the barrier against which we have to work and overcome to make so many of the points we want to make about organization politics and how we want to engage electoral politics, that so much of the call from Black punditry comes wrapped in this very aggressive Black radical wrapping, but it is ultimately to be seen as relevant to the liberal wing of state power, the Democratic Party, to get funding, to get those millions that are spent in media promoting Democratic Party candidates, and it limits the range of thoughts and ideas that can be discussed and popularly promoted to Black audiences, even through an ostensibly Black media outlet. So forgive my technical difficulties, just wanted to start a little bit early to get to that. And but we can always come back to all of that and more. But let's get to the real business of the day, starting with a tribute to our elder comrade and dear brother Kwame Nkrumah. So don't go anywhere. Back here in just a minute on I Mix What I Like.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We have an All-African People's Revolutionary Party gathering roundtable with the addition of my good brother, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, Onye Sonwu Chatoyer, forgive me and correct me, please. Welcome, longtime member of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, and of course, Zizwe Chaigu. I just said it all. Was practicing
it's
it.
Okay.
I was remembering it. Chaigu. Say your name, my man. Say your name.
Chaguka. T is silent. Chaguka. Yeah.
Chaguka.
Okay.
I was anyway, my bad. Anyway,
it's okay. It's
it
no
is
problem.
what it is. My anglicized tongue. Greetings to you both. Please correct anything that I've said so far about your names and titles, and welcome. And then let's get to it, because I love the topic and how you want to run, what you want to do, where we want to go.
Let me open up by saying we want to really thank you for giving us this opportunity to pay tribute to the immortal Kwame Nkrumah. And although we say he's immortal, we know that he was a mortal who did some great things as a result of being immersed among the masses of the people. He was a product of the masses, and he took that opportunity to fight for the masses. He loved the masses of African people and humanity, and of course, they loved him back. And by the way, his name was Francis. He had that slave name. I remember you said last week, Jared, that our brothers and sisters who come here from the continent, you say you don't accept them giving you them slave names. You make it to the African name.
Right.
Just a little side note.
And not just the Africans, Asians too. Like, because that's been big. A lot of the East Asians come to and talk about, call me Susie and Jennifer, and I'm like, no, I'll work with you, just like I did this morning. I beg your forgiveness and give me a chance. I will work with me. I will struggle through it.
You just say it may take you a long time to get it right. But
I want to struggle with it.
To introduce the topic, what I wanted to see if we could do was I want to do a quick summary, if it's all right with our other panelists, of Kwame Nkrumah's life, and then we get into the details of his accomplishments and all that stuff, you know. And of course, most of us know that he was born in Ghana in a small village called Nkrofu in 1909, September 21st or the 18th, depending on who you ask. And he went to missionary school, and he was raised. He was Roman Catholic, and eventually he wound up becoming a teacher at this missionary school at the Teachers College in Achimota. So he began to hone his skills at a very early age. Eventually, he was able to get some money with the help of relatives to go to school in the United States, like most of our brothers and sisters do, because of the brain drain. They want to go to Europe and America and get that education, And so he did the same thing. But even before he left Ghana, he was being influenced by a Ghanaian brother by the name of Agre. His last name is Agre. I can't pronounce his first name. About Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, and others who were Pan-Africanists and nationalists. So he was getting it at a very early age. And so when he came to the Snakes, we know that he went to college and he went to Lincoln University, attained a degree in theology and economics. And even before he was admitted into school, it was a struggle because they didn't take his application. It took him a year to get his application accepted. And when he went to the Snakes, he didn't have no money. He was homeless. He had to stay in one of the brothers' rooms who was born on the continent. And one particular person who helped him was Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, who was at Lincoln University before him and helped him out quite a bit in terms of getting himself acclimated to life in the Snakes. He lived in New York City, and he couldn't pay his rent half the time. It was a lady who let him slide with the rent for a while, and when he became head of state, he came back and greased her palms real good, So anyway, he comes to school to the Snakes, gets that degree at Lincoln University. Then he went on to get a degree in theology at the University of Pennsylvania. And while he was a student, he started an organization called the African Students Association in the United States and Canada. That a lot of campuses have those organizations for our brothers and sisters born back home. And so, we talk about these details of his life up until we show that first clip. But moving right along, after
I'm sorry to cut you, but are you going to say anything about the Harlem History Club and the Blighting Society?
Yep, I sure was.
My apologies.
No problem. Yeah, man. Well, that's cool because you reminded me. You helped remind me about that. When he was living in New York, he was exposed to all the stuff going on in Harlem with all the great speakers like Garvey and who were some of the other folks? Carlos Cook. He was in the Harlem History Club. Who did he meet there? John Henry Clark.
John Henry Clark was there, of course, and Huggins and
So he was immersed. Yeah. He was immersed in these discussions with these giants. We got so many great sheroes and heroes, and he was one who was a product of the masses of the people, of course. And so when he came to New York, he got immersed in all that stuff that was going on in 1935. And of course, what was going on in the world at that time? The Italians invaded Ethiopia, right? So that kind of sparked his interest in organizing Africa, unifying Africa, and fighting against colonialism. But of course, he said the one book that fired his enthusiasm more than anything else was The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. So moving right along, after he leaves the Snakes, he moves to England in 1945, and he gets a degree in economics, and he joins this group called the Circle. And he was introduced to C.L.R. James by George Padmore at that time. And he worked with a lot of other Marxist revolutionaries in England. And they had this group called the Circle, And so he was getting all that political education all along the way. And he was honing his organizational skills from an early age, right? So then, of course, we had the Fifth Pan-African Congress that he helped to organize with George Padmore and put W.B. Du Bois as the head of it. And so I'll stop there and let our other panelists talk about some of the fill in some of the details that I may have missed up to that point of the Fifth Pan-African Congress.
Thanks so much, Zizwe, for that run through of Nkrumah's early life. It really struck me while you were talking, there's like a common refrain that like Pan-Africanism is not reciprocal, that there's no connection to Africans in the United States. But you can clearly see in Nkrumah's early life, and he's not unique in this respect, that that connection existed from the very beginning, that it's not just decades old, but hundreds of years old. African people have been coordinating across colonial borders to build struggles for our liberation, to build strategies that are going to liberate African people all over this planet. So I feel like his life really exemplifies that, like exemplifies how we learn from each other and influence each other across colonial borders. But the other thing I wanted to say about the Pan-African Congress that also kind of exemplifies who Nkrumah was that W.B. Du Bois, of course, was like instrumental in organizing the first several Pan-African Congresses. Nkrumah mentions in his speech at the All African Peoples Conference that the first 4 Pan-African Congresses were primarily organized by the diaspora. They were certainly anti-colonial in essence, but they didn't represent folks on the front lines of the anti-colonial struggle in Africa. Until the 5th Pan-African Congress, when we had, the leaders of anti-colonial movements, trade unionists, students, people who were in the struggle on the front lines against, fighting against European imperialism, European colonialism, saying that we can't just ask for better treatment within a colonial system. We have to seek the overturning of that colonial system. We have to say definitively that European people have no right whatsoever to any kind of state control or control of land or control of resources and labor in Africa, that Africa is for Africans, period. So the 5th Pan-African Congress is when we became like a clearly militant, revolutionary, anti-colonial Pan-African movement. And so W.B. Du Bois instrumental in organizing those congresses, but also Amy Jacques Garvey, who was Marcus Garvey's wife, was instrumental in organizing that 5th Pan-African Congress. And in the modern day, a lot of times people, they had that beef, Du Bois and Garvey, and so people will pick a side, even though they're both dead. But Nkrumah never did. Nkrumah took the best of what both men believed and synthesized that when he was developing his analysis of how we should wage the African Revolution. And again, an example of how Nkrumah exemplifies how we should move in terms of building a Pan-African movement, not leaning into division and disunity, but rather taking the best of what we have achieved to move forward.
Imagine that. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Todd, jump in. You had a story you wanted to share.
I'm just here to tell some stories. Look, I'm going to be honest, audience. I thought I was going to come on at 8, so, but I didn't know it was going on at 9. But let me tell you, I'm glad to be on at 8. I'm glad to be on with these folks because I'm going to have a couple of brief stories to tell. But I want to preface it by saying that one of the great honors of my life was meeting Kwame Ture when he came to Seton Hall University, where I now teach Africana Studies, my alma mater, way back in 1989. And back then he was still young and very vibrant. So, I mean, he walked into the Black Student Union going, okay, where is everybody? I'm here, and I'm like, he looked like he walked just out of Eyes on the Prize, right into our midst. And it was an amazing thing. I had the honor of introducing him when he spoke at Seton Hall. And what he said, I never forgot. And as we look at what's going on with the European world right now, and we look at King Charles running around the UK trying to, continue to have white supremacist unity, one of the things he said was he talked about how it didn't really matter how long it was going to take, whether it would take 100 years or 500 years, but that, I don't know if he said whether it was the Scottish or whether it was the Irish, that they were going to be free. That is natural to want to be free and to want to be liberated. And when you look at the fact that Scotland almost succeeded from the UK just a few years ago and is even still talking about that, every time I watch that news and look at how the European world and how King Charles is trying to keep a UK and not just in England, I think of Kwame Ture. So I just wanted to preface that.
So, and of course, Ture took his name, who was just in the news recently in The Guardian, where it was exposed again, for some of us again, that the British and the U.S. states were putting Kwame Ture under surveillance, in part, as they said in the story, because of his Pan-Africanism and socialism, which he had picked up largely from his work with but they kept calling him Stokely Carmichael. They didn't want to acknowledge that he took his name from Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré, and didn't want to acknowledge, or they want, I think, want to deny these kinds of connections and the impact of people like Nkrumah on Touré and on people like those of us gathered here, and ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. And then, so even as we started with this discussion of Darren Seals this morning, there's this ongoing surveillance, this ongoing state intervention in all kinds of Pan-African organizational efforts, always with this constant fear of socialism, Pan-Africanism. So Onyesunmu, Zizwe, before, I know we got some clips you want us to play, but I wanted us to use that as a sort of segue to talk a little bit about what were these ideas. So when they gathered in 45, when Nkrumah was becoming more prominent and whatever, more prominent, what were the ideas that he began working with when you say that he blended Du Bois and Garvey and then what he ended up impacting, developing AAPRP and his goals, etc., that were passed on, of course, to Touré and many others.
You want to go ahead?
So in the speech, I believe we're going to play the speech from the All African People's Conference, where Nkrumah is talking about the vision for United Socialist Africa in a post-colonial world after the armed struggles against colonialism have been won. And so he's talking about the political and economic structures that are required to be built to achieve the objective of unified socialist Africa. So in the speech, we're going to hear him talk about the necessity of an African high command, which is like a military force under the control of a unified socialist Africa, as opposed to the hodgepodge of neocolonial militaries that we have right now. You're going to hear him talking about an African common market. You're going to hear him talking about the necessity of one Central African Federation made up of representatives from different nations all across the African continent. And so he's basically laying out the model for how the state of one unified socialist Africa should be built. He lays out the blueprint.
All right. And in addition, he had these concepts in his mind to be worked out as early as when he was in England before the Fifth Pan-African Congress. Because when you read some of his material, he says that he had these ideas when he was in the Snakes, when he was influenced by Garvey, right? And so his whole intent was to build what it was called a Marxist, a union of African socialist republics, when he was in that group called the Circle in England, right? So he had these all conceptualized, and so they called him to go join the United Gold Coast Convention in 1947. They was afraid of his so-called Marxist leanings, but he was so strong in terms of organizational skill that the United Gold Coast Convention, which was formed in 1947 in Ghana, they wanted him so bad because of his skills and his oratory skills, whatever he had, they wanted to use up to build up their strength among the masses of people in Ghana. See, so yeah, he had those ideas already early, and he began to put them into practice in the Fifth Pan-African Congress when they had on the agenda the discussions about imperialism and all that. And they came out with resolutions that they wanted to build mass parties. And the first mass party, my understanding is that the Neo Destour Party of Tunisia, 1947, was the first one that came about in Africa. And then, of course, we had a slew of mass political parties that emerged in Africa that led to the independence of Africa and the conference, the All African People's Conference that took place in Ghana that Oyesunmu talked about.
Right on. All right. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So I would like us to see that clip on the independence speech that Nkrumah did in 1957 at this point.
So what I'm trying to share here, is it just the clip that I'm sharing? I'm assuming you set this up already, Zizwe? And
yeah, it's the other clip. It was two of them. The one clip is the Independence Day speech, and this one that you're showing now, it has the All African People's Conference speech. Where he
Okay, so
outlined
there's
what
an.
all he's
Oh,
saying.
I'm sorry. There's another link because this is
Yeah.
again. This was what I was saying before. This is the only link I have from you. So if there's another link
Okay.
you wanted me to share,
Well, we could
I would need you to send that.
You need me to send it?
Yeah, that's what I was saying before. This is the only link I have. I only have this one link. So if you sent another link, I don't have it. So you can put it in the private chat if you want.
Okay, I can do that.
So so we're playing, but because it says here that you've clipped it. So am I playing just the clip or the whole thing? Although it's only 1 minute. I don't know. I'm not.
It's 3 parts. The first one is 1 minute.
Okay.
The second one's about 5 minutes. So
all right. Okay, I'm just gonna push play, and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
All right.
The Gold Coast, Nkrumah had formed his own political party and won a massive majority in 1956 elections. This resulted in getting the British to agree to grant independence in March of the following year. The United States' interest in Africa was at a peak, and a number of prominent Americans attended the independence celebrations. These included then Vice President Richard Nixon and Dr. Martin Luther King.
I know that's your favorite part.
Exactly.
Nkrumah took advantage of the moment to call for freedom throughout Africa.
Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with total repression of African continent.
The Gold Coast, Nkrumah had formed his own political party and won a massive majority.
So,
that was
there
it.
More? Okay.
That's the first one.
Okay. All right. So, I'll let you. Yeah, because I don't see the other link. So, who would like to add on to that or say more about that? Or
I would like to tell one of my stories while you guys are getting the tech together.
Sure.
I have 2, so I'm going to try to make them as brief as possible. And by the time I'm finished, I think you guys will be set. And then I'll come back in the next hour. One story I think everybody knows who follows the life of John Henry Clark. John Henry Clark had tried for decades to get to Africa, and as he says in the Great and Mighty Walk, his documentary, he said he kept saying that next year he'd go, next year he'd go, next year he'd go. Well, he went, and unfortunately, he was depending on a check that the Pittsburgh Courier had given him, because remember he had written those Great Chiefs of Africa series for the Pittsburgh Courier, which I don't know if he counted it as a book or not, but it is listed as one of his books, right? So he gets to Ghana because a family who's read his short story, The Boy Who Painted Christ Black, wrote him, and they decided to sponsor him in Accra, right? So he goes to Accra, and his check bounces from the Pittsburgh Courier. This is why Dr. Ball Black Press is always begging for money, right? As you saw in the last segment, right? And so he is on the road because he's on the road, watching the procession of Nkrumah, and he looks as Ghanaians do, right? He fits in. He said, Nkrumah sees him and says, what are you doing in my country? And he talked about what had happened to him, his check bounced, he's kind of stuck in Accra, and so then Dr. Clark becomes the editor of the Ghana Evening News, Nkrumah's newspaper. And he's written various things about his time in Ghana, but one of the things that he wrote was that he felt, and this might have been in Notes for an African World Revolution, it might be. Dr. Ball will correct me, or someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but in Notes for an African World Revolution, he talks about Nkrumah's mistake. He said, the problem was he was going with the white Marxist model and not with the model of the African agrarian masses. And I always thought that was interesting. Another story I want to quickly share is kind of an exclusive I'm going to give to I Mix What I Like because it's been so kind to me. Noel Hanrahan, who has been in charge of Mumia Abu-Jamal's much of his materials, gave me the honor of actually letting me listen to his raw cassette tapes. You know, radio reporters used to go around with these big tape recorders called Marantas, and they had all these tapes, cassette tapes, and they would do all their interviews on cassette tapes before they would transfer it to reel-to-reel and then do their radio newscast. This is the analog era, folks. So I got to listen to what Mumia's raw tapes are like, you know, in terms of him interviewing people on the street, interviewing, celebrities, interviewing people. And one of the things that I got to hear is when Mumia asked the question of Nnamdi, when he asked the question of Nnamdi Ezekwe, because Nnamdi came back to the university. He came back to Lincoln or the University of Pennsylvania. I'm not sure which campus he was, but he was at the University of Pennsylvania. So what I'd like to do now is just read one short paragraph from my book on Mumia, my forthcoming book on Mumia, the main biography, because I have this whole chapter devoted to Mumia as a radio reporter. And so I just want to read one paragraph about when Mumia interviewed Ezekwe and what Ezekwe said, and then I would like to hear what the guests would have to say about
Right, we
that.
got clips to play, so we'll play them after that. Go ahead.
All right, and I'm just going to read this paragraph really quickly. Perhaps the cultural high point of these audio snapshots was Abu Jamal's covering of Nnamdi Ezekwe, the first president of Nigeria, speaking at his alma mater. Hold on, I hit a wrong button. I got to find this segment again. There we go. Speaking at his alma mater and receiving an honorary doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania in May 1980. Abu Jamal asked a question a black radio correspondent who used to be a Panther would ask: why didn't Pan-Africanism work? And here's the quote from Ezekwe. Quote, "We both, me and Kwame Nkrumah, agreed on the future of Pan-Africanism. But there's one thing to be sentimental and another thing to be realistic. We all agreed on Pan-Africanism. That is, Africans should get together. But we found out that in real practice, how the League of Nations failed. I told Kwame in 1960, I said, Kwame, we've made a mistake. We've misled our people to believe that it is possible to have a continental government. He said, I said, well, it might be sort of a utopia. It works as an idea, but let's be realistic. Has the European continent succeeded in having a pan-Europeanism? Hold on one second. I have to find this part of the page. Latin America, North America, Asia, Australia. Ezekwe said a personal ambition played a role in the destruction of Pan-Africanism. He said, I said, everybody wants independence. Hold on, going to the next page. Everybody wants independence and wants to be in the saddle, and some don't want to step down. I said, so don't you see, Kwame, that we're dealing with human nature? So I thought that was a very interesting quote from Ezekwe in 1980. So I would love to hear the guests talk about that.
Absolutely. And let me run this clip.
Welcome to Candid Africa, truthful and unapologetic.
There is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. And my last warning to you is that you ought to stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We are waiting. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just minutes ago, I made it point that we are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. It's the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. But today, may I call upon you all that at this great day, let us all remember that nothing in the world can be done unless it has the purported support of God. We have done the battle, and we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate, of the territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. And here, I will ask the band to play the Ghana national anthem.
I don't mean any disrespect, but I'm not a fan of these anthems. Where's the funk? Where's the rhythm? Bring some drums. You know what I'm saying? Everybody trying to sound the same. This European marching band stuff.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, should be banging it out.
Well, we talking what, 1957.
I hear you. I hear you.
Freedom.
Did you like?
I mean, he was getting the more. I mean, he was dealing with the more important aspects. I get it. I'm just saying that was just my quick 2 cents. You know. Anyway,
the key was that he said the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is tied to the independence of the whole of Africa. I want to apologize for my technical difficulties. I don't know if it's me or this big thunderstorm that just passed that knocked me off my PC. And so you asked us to comment on that clip. Yeah, that was one of the clips. That was much more fuller in terms of that Independence Day speech. But I'm going to send you that other one in the chat too.
Okay. Did you want to say anything? And then, by the way, you were requested, and I want to remind everybody in the next hour, we're talking about the Woman King, and spoiler alert ahead. So just FYI, but there was a specific request, Anya, that you stick around and join that conversation. I don't know if you're able to, but you'd be more than welcome if you're up for it.
I actually haven't seen the movie yet, so I can't. Okay. I don't want to see the spoilers.
Okay. Well, there it is. You're welcome back after the fact if you like. Anyway. What anything else regarding that clip, or was there the other link that you wanted me to play? Now I'm confused.
Yeah,
my apologies to everybody for my end of the production issues and tech issues too. So
okay, so what I wanted to do was to discuss how at independence he promised to that Ghana's independence is meaningless unless it's tied to the independence of the whole of Africa. So immediately after gaining independence, Nkrumah held the All African People's Conference, April 1958, in which he gathered the heads of states together to plan and strategize on how to liberate the whole rest of Africa. And of course, in December of 1958, he invited 62 different liberation organizations to Africa to plan and strategize the liberation of the whole of Africa. And some of the eventual presidents of these different countries and the leaders of liberation movements like Jomo Kenyatta, Robert Mugabe, and many others were in attendance. In fact, Patrice Lumumba was there in December 1958. So he used Ghana as a base, as a liberated zone, to establish the program of liberating Africa and establishing Pan-Africanism, the total liberation and unification of Africa, using Ghana as that initial base in 1958. And maybe on your side, we want to go into more detail.
And if you would, in that detail, please, if either of you, would pick up on when you say, even when Zizwe says the word base and wanted Ghana to be a base, that was figurative, but also literal in terms of his work with supporting military efforts, guerrilla warfare. He wrote a handbook on guerrilla warfare, which I was trying to find, but every book that I want is in a part of the house I can't get to apparently whenever I want it. So, but he, could you say a word or two about that part as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I noticed someone in the comments saying that the speech was anti-symbolism because Ghana's government didn't control the resources of the army. And I was like, what? Because what I learned,
I missed that.
I know what I learned was that Ghana acted as like a base of operations, meaning like a liberated territory under the control of revolutionary African forces that was used to both develop those forces, like Ghana provided, and Guinea under Secretary provided military training for African revolutionary military formations all over the continent, provided funding, provided political support. Kwame Nkrumah traveled all over Africa and also throughout the anti-imperialist world, building deep connections with movements opposing imperialism. That's part of the reason why the US considered him such a threat. The other thing that the Nkrumah's government did when it was in power for 13 years was that it systematically nationalized resources, Ghana's resources. One of the times I went to Ghana, we went to this place, this factory known as the Bonza Tire Factory in the western region of Ghana. And that was actually, Ghana has a lot of rubber trees, like many other nations in West Africa, like Liberia. And what the Nkrumah government did was take control of the land and the rubber trees and use and build this factory where hundreds of Ghanaian workers were given good union jobs, were given advanced professional training, were given healthcare, were given housing for themselves and their families. And they were put to work using Ghana's own rubber to manufacture Ghana's own tires. Before Nkrumah was in power, they were importing tires for high prices that they could have made themselves. As soon as they took power, they took what about the work of making their own products? And that was just one example. They did it with cocoa, they did it with sisal, they did it with fishing. That's why they had the Volta Dam project to both have control of Ghana's fishing industry, but also to achieve industrialization, to make electricity more stable throughout the country. So there was a process of economic transformation that took place when Nkrumah and the CPP were in power. And it seems oftentimes that people don't understand this dimension of Nkrumah. He wasn't just talking, he was building socialist revolution in Ghana. He was building a revolutionary Pan-African movement that actually was contending for power. That's why the US and Britain sanctioned Ghana, attempted to destroy its economy, to say, look, it's not working, socialism is a failure. That's also why the CIA got him up out of there when they realized that they were not going to be successful discrediting this man. So I think it's important for those of us who are African revolutionaries to actually study our ancestors, to study revolutionary projects, because certainly there are criticisms that can be made, but criticism is more effective when you know what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying?
Message! How do you respond so quickly with that?
I mean, look, I don't want to go too much in. There's a skill set over here that StreamYard is limiting. I'm trying to tell them. It's on them. There's some production. No, I'm just playing. There's a whole little production thing they got. It could be better, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, anyway, that was right on. I appreciate that. Thank you for that clarity, because and Ricky, you were asking about my dear friend Kwesi Konadu. All respect and love to that brother, but we just do not see eye to eye on this issue. And I just don't, I can't claim that I know as much as he does. He on this, but where
it's a good debate to have.
And we need Onye to do it, maybe.
Right.
I don't know.
I was thinking about maybe Onye and kind of do debate. That would be fascinating. All right, folks. I'm gonna jump out.
Ty,
Look,
just be quiet. Just take a bathroom break and come right back. We almost there anyway. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll be back.
Okay. Yeah. I don't even know why he's tripped. What is he talking about? Just stick around. Just sit down.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. I don't even know what to say after that. Just message everybody, run that back again, and whenever somebody runs something silly about Nkrumah, just run that back again. Clip that. What else should we do? Where else do we need to go from here? Because one of the things I at least definitely wanted to make sure we were clear on is that he and others, that is Nkrumah and his comrades, left us a framework that we all work within to varying degrees. Admittedly, you know, I'm that way at the bottom end of it, but the All African People's Revolutionary Party that is still here. It's a framework. It's an organization. It offers a lot of important analysis and you know, so you end up. You can sound, you can start to sound like my guests here if you work with anyway. But what else would you like us to say?
Show this clip I sent to you in the chat, and then we'll talk about the points that was mentioned that Oyesanwu said earlier in terms of building a African common market, a high command, etc. And then we'll go into present day Africa and Ghana, in which this all leads to the necessity to build the All African People's Revolutionary Party, All African Committee for Political Coordination, and the All African People's Revolutionary Army.
Right.
Go ahead.
Fellow freedom fighters, comrades and friends, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to Accra and to this conference of African freedom fighters and supporters of the growing movement for Africa's liberation and unity. It is good for our cause to have a periodic meeting of this kind to examine our position in the great struggle to rid Africa completely and forever of imperialism and its handmaidens, colonialism and neocolonialism. Africa is rich and not poor. As the great wealth that has been taken out of our continent over 5 centuries of spoliation and extortion very well proves. Africa has immense actual and potential wealth.
Who had their cell phone on during the speech?
Bauxite, iron ore, uranium, asbestos, chrome, cobalt, and hopes of other minerals. Our essential agricultural produce have all been drained away by colonialist imperialism. Africa is far from being poor. It is Africans who are poor, not Africa. And they are poor because of the uncounted profit that has been made out of the exploitation of their labor and their lands. If we are being baited to enter a European community, we must have something that community needs, and needs badly, when it pretends to offer a bonus by way of aid. When Greeks come bearing grapes, should we not look them well in the mouth? If I may mix my metaphor, but I'm sure you get my meaning. I raise this point so that it will stay in your minds when you may be tempted by the seductive promises of new colonialism to forget the real character of colonialist imperialism and be persuaded away from your own true interests and those of Africa. For today, we must each see ourselves as part of Africa in order that we may face colonialist imperialism and its new form, neocolonialism, on a continent-wide front. For unity must be the keynote of our actions. Our enemies are many, and they stand ready to pounce upon and exploit our very weakness. They tell us that this particular person or that particular country has greater or more favorable potentialities than the other. They do not tell us that we should unite, that we are all as good as we are able to make ourselves once we are free. Remember, always, that you have 4 stages to make. First, the attainment of freedom and independence. Secondly, the consolidation of that freedom and independence. Thirdly, the creation of unity and community between the free African states. Fourth, the economic and social reconstruction of Africa.
All right, we're just going to skip ahead a little bit in this speech. He's already clarified so much of what seems to remain confused about him, but we just pick it up here.
Surrender. We must begin to build immediately our own continental common market. For it is easy for anyone who studies the common market organization closely to realize that the common market is aimed at harnessing the African countries to satisfy the profit lust of the imperialist bloc and to prevent us from following an independent neutralist policy. It is easy to see that the imperialists and the colonialists are determined to retain the African countries in the position of suppliers of cheap raw materials. If we do not resist this threat, and if we throw in our lot with the common market, we shall doom the economy of Africa to a state of perpetual subjection to the economy of Western Europe. This will, of course, hinder the industrialization of our young African states. It is impossible to think of economic development and national independence without possessing an unfettered capacity for maintaining a strong industrial power. The activities of the common market are therefore fraught with dangerous political and economic consequences for the independent African states. The organization constitutes an attempt to replace the old system of colonial exploitation by a new system of collective colonialism, which will be stronger and more dangerous than the old evils we are striving to liquidate from our continent. This is another reason why we should come together in a unified African economic plan, which, operating on a continental scale, can make a solid attack on the imperialist domination in Africa. We should, without delay, aim at the creation of a joint African military command. There is little wisdom in our present separate effort to build up and maintain defense forces, which, in any case, would be ineffective in a major world conflict. If we examine this problem realistically, we would ask, which single African state could protect itself against an imperialist aggressor? And how much more difficult this will be when some states are allowing the imperialists to maintain bases on their territories. I have already referred to the military forces which South Africa is raising and the danger it poses for the new African states and the struggle of those still in chains. Only our unity can provide us with anything like adequate protection. Those problems can best be met within a unified Africa. And it should be possible in the higher reaches of our endeavor to devise a constitutional structure which will secure the objectives I have outlined, and yet preserve the sovereignty of each of the countries joining the Union. Countries within the Union will naturally maintain their own constitutions, continue to use their own national emblems and national anthems and other symbols and paraphernalia of sovereignty. Regional associations and territorial groupings can only be other forms of balkanization unless they are conceived within the framework of a continental union. There are existing models which we can modify or adapt to our pattern. The United States of America the Soviet Union, India, and China have proved the efficacy of unions embracing large stretches of land and population. Long live African freedom fighters. Long live African independence. Long live your struggle. And long live African unity.
Right on, right on, right on. And shout out to Marshall McLuhan. The medium is the message. When you hear and see the argument, it seems to resonate differently. So to hear him say Joint African Military Command, it stands out in stark contradistinction to what has been imposed with Africa Command, of course. And to Quaker Anarchist's question, did the European Union steal his ideas? Yes. And applied it to themselves. Of course they would. But please, either of you, that was awesome.
Did you have thoughts these way, or should I go? Oh, you want me to go?
Sure.
Yeah. So someone in the comments is like, it's like he's speaking prophecy, and he really like lays out. It's like he's predicting the future, and really all that was historical and dialectical materialist analysis. He's saying that if we allow, these European imperialist powers, these Western capitalist powers, to continue to open up military bases in Africa, we are going to create a situation where the dominant military force on the continent is controlled by outside forces. And that is the current situation in Africa today, with the United States Africa Command, with the NATO powers, with the French occupation of the Sahel, with Israel getting up in there. And the United Nations so-called peacekeeping missions, which just build more division. So he was absolutely correct in warning us about what was going to happen if we allowed this to continue. And he is correct to this day in saying that we need to build an army, a continental African army that is under African control. We cannot have all of these African nations, with the exception, by the way, of Eritrea, developing military agreements with imperialist powers. We are basically handing the reins to the folks that are looting Africa and exploiting African people. We saw it a few summers ago with the End SARS movement in Nigeria, where youth in the streets of Nigeria were rising up against this SARS, like these pigs who are literally like the SWAT model of policing from the United States, pasted into Africa, brought by AFRICOM. So the masses of African people are resisting police terrorism, military violence that's being imported by the United States and NATO powers. So he was so correct. We are witnessing what he was warning us about right now. You're muted, Zizwe.
You're muted, Zizwe. Hold on. Go ahead.
And the solution to that problem was spelled out in the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which he first put together when he was head of state in Ghana. And like she said earlier, the CIA, they knew what he was doing. They knew he was laying out this plan to liberate the whole of Africa. So they made sure he was overthrown. And what did they do when they overthrew him? They destroyed the books first. They got the books first. They destroyed the manuscript for the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. So when he came back from China, they were so cowardly, they had to do it while he was in China, in Vietnam, trying to bring a peace deal. So when he comes back, he goes to Conakry, Guinea, and he rewrites it, and he gets the help of Amilcar Cabral, Ahmed Sekou Touré, and he has Kwame Touré and all of them read the manuscript. And then they started the first circle of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, composed of those very people. And when Nkrumah died in 1972, Amilcar Cabral made the famous speech. He didn't die of cancer. He supposedly died of prostate cancer. April 27, 1972. He said he died of the cancer of betrayal. Famous speech by one of the giants, Amilcar Cabral.
Damn.
Yes, sir.
I also want to say, speaking to the power of Nkrumah's analysis and also the strategies that he was building in Africa, he wasn't just talking, he was building these strategies. When he released that book, neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism. Like what he's talking about in that speech, he really lays it out in detail with receipts in Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism. And when that book was released, there's like a State Department memos that you can find on the internet now. They were like released with a Freedom of Information Act request, where the U.S. government was like, "What the hell is this?" Like they were like absolutely not, very upset. Ghana had like a request for aid. The U.S. was like, "Nope, cut it off." They applied additional sanctions, and just shortly after that is when Nkrumah was overthrown. But that book caused like a massive wave of outrage within the U.S. and other imperialist countries, because they knew that he was spot on. He was giving up the game, and they could not allow it. And so, like, again, it's really important for folks to not just like talk about Nkrumah, not just like engage in like uninformed discourse about Nkrumah, but study Nkrumah. Your enemy understood this man as a threat, understood the movement to build Pan-Africanism that he was a part of as an existential threat. So we need to study that movement. We need to study this man, because clearly he was onto something.
And he also linked it up with the international movement against imperialism by creating an organization called the Organization of Solidarity with the Peoples of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. That first meeting was at the Tricontinental Conference in Cuba in January of 1966, right? Where he linked up with the International Liberation Forces, and he got overthrown in February of 1966, right? So he knew that Africa had to work with the international community in terms of liberating the whole of humanity. And one of the things he's known for saying is that once you liberate Africa, you liberate the whole of humanity. And he's correct in that dialectical historical materialist analysis, because the capitalist system is so dependent on Africa. And as we know historically, what happened? They built up all their capital, primitive accumulation, as Karl Marx calls it, from the enslavement of African people and the hunting and killing of the native people in the Western Hemisphere. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Anybody who wants to, maybe we could put that on the in the chat.
And I could add it to the show notes as well. Absolutely. Please. I wanted to just very quickly, because Todd, I beg your forgiveness, but I don't think it's necessary. We can hold off a couple minutes if the two of you have a couple more minutes before we get to the Woman King, because I felt like this was going to happen, and I'm feeling it more as it approaches, that is such a departure and devolution and descent from where we are right now, intellectually, politically. So spoiler alert, all that stuff. But I did want to ask you all a couple of other things, if we can, and I definitely want to echo joining the party. One of the highlights of my attempt at returning to the party has been reading again as a collective the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, Consciencism, and getting to do it with groups of African people all around the world. It's very important. Like it's excellent. And then the neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism, in the essential book, where to your point, he lays out all of the corporate ownership. I mean, he's like so detailed. Like, this is where all your resources are going. Here's the right company that's got all your money. And and then I just wanted to very quickly say 2 points. One, specific to our situation in the United States. He said, Nkrumah, that is domestic. He said, capitalism practiced at home is domestic colonialism. So whatever language we want to use, let's be clear about what's happening. And then the other thing, when he says in that speech, African common market, I just want to make sure to echo or emphasize rather, he's not talking about Black entrepreneurialism and Black capitalism. Okay, I just because I feel like somebody might want to pull that line out and say, see, and Nkrumah was talking about getting our businesses together. That's not okay. So
you mean he's not talking about the Wakanda that the African Union wanted to create after Black Panther? Now, are you sure?
And wait till we talk about how Lupita says that Black Panther set a standard that Woman King couldn't even get to. Damn. Anyway, but
Garrett,
Please go ahead.
The Woman Kings is a segue to Nkrumah created this organization called the Pan African Women's Organization in 1962, Tanzania. Right? So here he was establishing organizations for all African women way back in the early 60s, right? And of course, we have our women's wing. Any revolutionary party got to have a women's wing, right? All African Women's Revolutionary Union, in which all our women, Sister Oya Sanwo was a member of. And so that's a great segue to our discussion, or you and Todd's discussion about the Woman King and how women must be in the front line of the struggle.
I do have to ask, though, there's one other question I did want to bring up this morning. I did briefly at once upon a time at the Africana Studies and Research Center under the director of its founder, Dr. James Turner, may he rest in power. I got to briefly meet, just in passing, as he came through, Gamal Nkrumah. And I wanted to ask you all about what is often, as you all know, the ongoing discussion and controversy in some circles about Nkrumah's marriage into that family, his visions of a Pan-African unity. Was this some betrayal of African people and a move towards Pan-Arabism? And, you know, could you talk a little bit about that? His marriage and that choice, and it's what he intended by it and how it has continued to reverberate.
My understanding was that everything he did was political, and that's what we say in our organization. Everything is political. So he married her, and it was a political decision to signify the unification of Northern Africa with Africa south of Sahara. That's why he married her. He really wasn't interested in marriage per se, but he wanted to show that the continent is one whole thing. And he made this very important statement. Once the Sahara Desert divided us, now is linking us together. And so when he married this woman from Egypt, that's what that signified.
Yeah, when we talk about one unified socialist Africa, we mean Africa from Cape to Cairo. We mean the whole continent. The whole continent belongs to African people. So that's what DJ said, 100% correct. I agree. And also, it's super important to understand that if we were to say only so-called sub-Saharan Africa, which is a construction of the colonizer, of imperialists, they made that up, that division. If we were to say that we're only going to focus on that part of Africa, and we're going to leave North Africa to its own devices, because like, who cares about Arab people, or they're not our friends, what would end up happening is that the imperialist powers would use North Africa as a bulwark against our revolutionary project in the rest of Africa. If we leave any part of the continent that we are trying to unify and liberate out of the project of Pan-Africanism, it will be used against us. And we see that all throughout history of them taking...
say he was wrong again, huh?
Exactly. In the Congo, for example, the way they got Patrice Lumumba was a micro-nationalist movement in Katanga that was led by sellouts that they used. Like he was murdered in Katanga, and Katanga received funding from the US, from Belgium. So we cannot allow this balkanization strategy continue. We can't allow the divide and conquer strategy continue. We have to unify Africa from Cape to Cairo, period. We do not have to buy in to the visions propagated by our enemy. So I think Nkrumah was absolutely correct. And I think people got to get on the same page about this. Like, look at what has worked and what has not, and let it go. Let it go.
Hey,
and right now,
he wanted Cape to Cairo for Europeans, then you're absolutely right. It should be for Africans. Sorry, Zizwe, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that right now, when you analyze AFRICOM, that military alliance that was set up by the United States with that African-sounding name, the bases go all along the Sahel to split North Africa from South Africa. Just wanted to bring that point up.
Right on. Thank you very much. Listen, I really appreciate you both coming on and leading us in this discussion. And you're either of you, both of you, all of you are always welcome back here anytime. And particularly to lead us in these kinds of discussions. I love it. And Nkrumah was amazing and left us so much to work with. So Thank you very much to the both of you. I
got to say one more thing, though.
Please, go ahead.
In the words of Kwame Nkrumah, if you're not in an organization fighting for the liberation of African people by your very act of inactivity, you are in fact against our people. If you don't like our organization, join some organization that's genuinely fighting for the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism, or fighting for our people. Thank you very much. Thank you, Todd.
Message.
Hey, and shout out to all the mail carriers, like my father once was. There was a lot of revolutionary organization in those spaces. So shout out to those spaces anyway.
Thank you. This has been a very deep hour. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you both very much. We'll be back again. Spoiler alert. With the discussion of the Woman King. Don't go anywhere. Much more coming up. I mix what I like. All right, let me just update the background. Let me get ready.
You are really getting fancy with these backgrounds.
I don't even want to get into a whole thing about how it was supposed to be even more fancy, and there's just all kinds of tech issues this morning, late last night, early this morning. But whatever. Let's.
As Dr. Haight would say, wait. I know you want to get into it, but as Dr. Haight would say, shout out to Dr. Haight. We miss you, Dr. Haight. We'd like to see you, Dr. Haight. But as Dr. Haight would very articulately say about this last hour, yo. Right?
Listen, the reality is Zizwe and Onye are dope, but that dopeness is aided by the organizational work, and again, my what I'll call a limited return has shown me already. I mean, it has been rereading stuff I have read several times actually, but over many years, but reading it in collectives with other people who are at minimum a peer group, if not senior to me intellectually on all these issues, this is essential. And that's why I used to always joke all the time that if you know, even outside of organization, if you should always try to be the smartest person in your circle, in your clique. And then once you feel like you've gotten there, you got to expand the circle and
see that's too much work. That's too much work for me. I'm lazy.
Well, that's because you always
my goal is to be the dumbest person in my clique, which I am very happy to do. But let me say this, let me say a point that's similar before we get to the Woman King, because I think what we're talking about this morning is very significant. I've never asked you your opinion of Robin D.G. Kelly. I've never asked that. But I spent the weekend reading the new preface to Angela Davis's autobiography, because she put out the new edition with a new preface, which I thought was really good. Very, very long preface that talked about her work with political prisoners and other organizations. But when I read Robin D.G. Kelly's new introduction or new preface to Freedom Dreams, I was very impressed with the amount of organizations he was naming and the amount of work that all of these organizations are doing. So, Kelly is a very serious theorist, but he's also a very serious person of praxis, because he talked about his own involvement and all of these organizations. And it was good to read that, because, to go back to the discussions we always have about, as you say, popular media. Well, wow. I hear that, Emma. Wow, Emma. Okay. I love self-confidence in the morning. Yes. Well, Emma, let me tell you, it's I'm trying to reach Dr. Ball. So, Dr. Ball can try to reach you, right? It's taking my life to try to reach Dr. Ball and Dr. Haight, right? It's taking my time to reach them. Because Lord knows when Dr. Ball and Dr. Haight talk, I just
all
sit quietly. I just absorb, right?
I'm just going to talk over these lies.
But let's get back. So So, you know, popular media is never going to mention all of these organizations that Kelly mentioned, and that you know you mentioned here, and then you know that's doing all this work. Particularly, you were saying with these study groups and things. Popular media is never going to discuss that. It's going to talk about Black Lives Matter and, you know, other organizations, the NAACP. It's never going to discuss this real work.
So just very quickly, my only issue with Robin Kelly is one I shared with him, which is that you supported Peniel Joseph, and I've had a multi-year now extended open invitation to Professor Kelly to discuss that with me publicly or privately, and we haven't gotten to it yet. And I understand that's not important to him, but that's my only issue with him. I think, you know, as a scholar, he is, I mean, even if people don't agree with everything he says, he is, I mean, his writing is amazing. His level of research, I think, is amazing. The levels of productivity, I think, are amazing. I've only ever thought when I see him even pop up in documentaries, like I wish he would have gone harder, but I don't ever feel like he's like fronting or making, you know, these other pop academic errors politically. I mean, I just, you know, he's, you know, yeah. So that's that. I did teach Freedom Dreams once upon a time for a semester. I love the book, and you know, welcome. I think again, Mick Jägermeister. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. That's my 2 cents, you know, on Kelly. I just don't agree with his public praise of Peniel Joseph.
What I noticed about Kelly,
our brightest, what is it, interpreter of Black Power?
Don't.
Anyway.
Don't. Well, as I've said before in this air, I mean, he is a bright interpreter of Black Power. It's his own definition. It's not the real scholarly.
Right. I don't want to do that this morning. Let's get into this movie.
Let's get into the Woman King. Let's get into the Woman King.
So I don't know how you want to go. You want to go first?
You have to go first. You have to go first.
Well, I'll start with, I guess I could start with, and I have a lot. I've actually gone down several rabbit holes, so I have a lot for us to talk a little bit about today. So I don't want to rush. And if folks, again, spoiler alert, I don't, you know, so, you know, folks want to dip out, please do. But I'll start with the 5 thoughts that I sent, my 5 quick thoughts that I sent to Dr. Ray Winbush and Paul Coates via email the other day after I saw them, you know, publicly praising the film on social media and, you know, even engaging in some back and forth with folks in discussion. So I invited them here this morning. They weren't able to make it. And I see that Coates has sent me a long response that I'll have to get to. So we'll have to have another conversation later on. But my 5 quick thoughts are these. And I'll add a 6th that I'll even start off with. As a film, I just don't think it is that good. Before we even get to the politics, and as I jokingly said to some people, and once we get to who wrote it, I am more confident in my initial thought. It is a lesser version of G.I. Jane set in the continent of Africa some time ago. It is the same formulaic story. It is done with less effectiveness. The pacing, I think, is wrong. I felt like they were taking scenes that they thought they needed to have and were just piecing them together haphazardly. We don't get the buildup we should get. We don't get we just don't, it's not told properly. It's just not, I don't think so. Before we even get to whatever I think about, I was just like, this is not, it's the same story. It's just, she gets trained, she comes in, we knew who was going to die. You know, there's always that tough sergeant that we saw, whether it was in the Last Samurai, with, you know, another, like all these movies do the same. The tough sergeant that trains you is definitely going to be the one that gets killed in battle, and then it's a sad scene, it's a traumatic scene, and all this other kind of stuff. But even in those moments, like I just don't feel like by the time Maui goes. Am I saying that right? I'm thinking I'm saying the other cartoon movie. I think you're right. The younger daughter. By the time she finishes her training, we're supposed to feel like she's gone through something, and we didn't get much. She went through the thorn thing, she ran the thing, but there wasn't that extended struggle with training. It was like we saw them run a little bit, she trained, boom. All right. But here are the 5 things I said real quick. 1, of course, this film is made given the focus of African rebellion against enslavement is against other Africans. That little flurry at the end was a teaser. Whites were never the target and barely the blame. And I would add that their death on screen was very tame and not bloody. Even when the sister is beating that dude over the head at the end of the movie, it's not even as bloody as a Rocky movie. Meanwhile, we've just spent a good 90 minutes or so watching Black people get their heads cut off, cut to pieces, raped, all kinds of things go on. And then by the time just like with the Nat Turner movie by Nate Parker, by the time the rebellion kicks off, the white people don't really die on screen. I'm like, what is going on here? All right. Number 2, the history is a mess. Dahomey were the enslavers and never stopped until the French ended them and killed the real Naniska on the battlefield 100 years after this film. All the phony speeches about freedom and whatnot were absurdly targeted at other Africans. So all of those speeches were added to the film so that people who in today's world would be like, yes, this is for us. And no. 3, talking to Dr. Wimbush here, who said in a public post that, and I put the link in the show description, that in the Time magazine review he said his favorite review of the film. I read that review, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. But I said, Ray, your favorite review cites an African scholar as the film's leading historian, but a review of the work of Wanchekon, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name, shows someone happy to focus on African corruption as the primary cause of African inequality. He openly rejects what he calls African-centered approaches that focus on colonialism as leading causes of today's inequality. So it stands to reason that he would be this film's guide, given nearly exclusive focus on Africans as the problem. All references in the film to Europeans being the problem are muted and historically inaccurate, put in to make today's audience think we are seeing something we are not. Number 4, I'm happy to get a better depiction. Oh, this was my little joke. I'm happy to get a better depiction than we mixed folks usually get in films like Sankofa. But the most positive male in the film is Malik, while African men are depicted as patriarchal and backwards or as enslavers. So I don't mind, if you want to make mixed folks the hero, I'm personally cool with that. But I just feel like, and I'm not saying he was that great, but relatively speaking, he seems to be the best depicted male in the film. And of course has the romance with our leading character. I feel like something funky is going on with that. But again, I believe white woman director who married a Black man may have wanted to put that in there for their children to feel a certain kind of way and a connection. I don't know. And then lastly,
the director is actually Black, by the way. The director is Prince, the sister who did Love and Basketball, Prince Blythewood. The director's Black.
But I thought
the writer.
Wait a minute. But But when I read her bio, I thought it said that she was okay. So she's Black adopted by Jews. I thought she was.
Oh, that I don't know. About
no, because I thought it was saying that she was. Maybe I'm mistaken. I apologize.
It's all right.
I know she was adopted and raised by Jews. And
I didn't know that.
And in one of the articles, it said she is Jewish.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I don't know if that means they took this Black woman and raised her as a. I don't know. Okay,
yeah.
So
no, I didn't know that.
To be checked on that.
No, I didn't know that.
I'm happy to be checked, and I'm misidentified all the time. So I apologize all the time. I apologize. So
all right.
Lastly, is very quick. It's more anti-Muslim nonsense too, with the Oyo depicted as they were. They get to be the turbaned bad guys with no backstory, and so on and so on. So, okay, those are my 5 quick points. I got much more, but let me stop there and let you stop it. Stop it.
I wish I had something as deep as you. I don't have a list. I mean, to me, I walked in thinking I was going to see, like a Dewey Dash type film or whatever, right? And notice how Dewey Dash only got to make one film. And by the way, that was supposed to be one of 5 scenarios she was supposed to do a whole career on, right?
Yeah,
but she
right.
pulled out Daughters because she saw there was no way the other films were going to be made. She got Daughters of the Dust done by a PBS Playhouse grant that no longer exists. So we almost didn't even have Daughters of the Dust, right? And of course I read
nobody has praised Black Panther here ever.
Right.
Never.
I also know that Dewey Dash also had an abortion to do that film, right? I mean, that's how serious this one shot that she had was. And as a result of Daughters, she never did a feature film again. She did some video work. She did a TV movie on Rosa Parks. I mean, so I was so naive thinking, okay, this is a Dewey Dash attempt, right? So I walk in the theater and I go, oh, Serafina. I remember that movie. Remember Serafina? The South African movie with Whoopi Goldberg.
Whoopi Goldberg, yeah.
Being the radical teacher, right? What's the name of that movie with Robin Williams with the where he plays the teacher? Because that was the model of that. Everything in Hollywood is to be a model of something white, right? So Whoopi Goldberg plays the radical teacher, the Robin Williams character, right? Who gets arrested and put away, just like Robin Williams in that movie. I forget the name of the movie. The chat will probably know the movie. But this young woman in this movie could be Serafina, right? I mean, the way Dead Poet Society. Thank you, Minister. Thank you. So they take this character and the young sister's South African, right, who looks 18 but is really 31. So
I don't know where everybody's from in this. I don't have.
As I was joking with you in a text, I said, I bet she played Serafina in her Born Free high school, right, in South Africa.
Oh damn.
So it's basically taking Serafina.
And she was supposed to be Lupita, and we're gonna get to that.
Oh yeah, because I didn't finish what you showed me, and then we're going to talk about that.
I got that from Geechee, and I watched the documentary, but okay, we're gonna get there.
Fantastic. So when I settled in and realized, oh, okay, they're going to do Serafina, but they're just going to do Serafina with the Dora Milaje. I was like, well, let's see what they do. Let's see if they actually do something. And so I'm watching the film, and I'm like, okay, I like the plot. Are we complicit in the slave trade of other Africans? Maybe we should stop doing that, right? Man, let me tell you, the Vernon philosophy, I pretend to be anti-Vernon philosophy. But the older I get, the more I understand the Vernon philosophy and the more critical I get of these images. And so, I'm never going to publicly admit to Dr. Ball that I'm probably more Vernon philosophy than I want to be. I'm going to, front. But let me tell you,
remember, everybody, the Vernon philosophy is, again, semi-satirical. It's not revolutionary and advancing something new intellectually. It's just reorganizing it. And ultimately, it does not say, it is, as I've written and I've argued, it is not a call for boycotting.
Right.
It is. If anything, I've said it's an intellectual boycott, so that when we go and see these films, we're clear not to let them do certain things to us politically that they are, I think, intending to do. That's really my point. It's a protective coding I'm encouraging, because I know we're going to see the films. I know we're going to discuss the films and whatever else we're talking about. So I'm just saying, and I think we have to, because as I look at even what some brilliant people have been saying about the film, and some people I really respect, I'm like, I think we have to be able to engage and have some criticism anyway. But anyway, go ahead.
No, I think that's important. And let's talk about why those brilliant people are probably saying that. Because didn't one of them say, like, didn't Anthony Browder say it was the closest to cinematic reparations or whatever we've ever received?
Yes, and yes.
Well, let's talk about why they think that. Haki Madhubuti has been very consistent for decades, right, on certain things he says, right? Hakeem Madabuti would be very disappointed in me because he would come to my apartment, he would see all the graphic novels I have lined up very neatly on my shelves, and he would say, "Where's your serious books, brother?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, they're in the closet right there in the back," right? So he'd be very disappointed in me, right? But I do understand what he says when he says, okay, if you're trying to raise an African child and you have Donald Duck and a Disney princess, Jasmine or whatever on the wall, like that's not going to work, right? And I think what our elders are doing is they're replacing Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse and Fred Flintstone or whatever. They're replacing them with the Dora. They're replacing them with the Sisters in Back of You, and they're saying, okay, from a psychological advancement point of view, this is a psychological advancement to reclaim the African mind, right? That image behind you is powerful, right? Where we're saying as media critics, and I think we have a role, is we have to say to these elders, okay, look, going from Donald Duck to the Dora Milaje to the Woman King is fine in an image way, particularly for women, particularly for dark-skinned women, right? But if we're not telling the real truth, if we're not telling the uncut Halle Garima, LA Film School type decolonized film, then we've turned the Dora Milaje and the Woman King into Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse. And I think that's a hard argument to make, and I think media critics like me and you have to unfortunately make that, right? So I think that's where our elders are coming from, because I've never seen such strong, beautiful, dark-skinned women warriors in a film before. I've never seen it before that film, right? But I had to go beyond that. I had to go to, as you were talking about, formula and the purpose of the formula. So let's deconstruct how the film was made, and then let's talk about the formula so we can see the travesty really that this film is.
Okay.
And by the way, I may be the only person on Black Power Media to say that I do love Black Panther, but it doesn't mean that I'm not critical of it, harshly critical of it, as we have to be. Even things you love.
But the point was about praise. Right. But that's also my point about the Vernon philosophy. Look, I said this to my wife and daughters who were with me yesterday when we saw the movie, and they really enjoyed it. They were crying at certain parts, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And this is my point. When you enjoy it in this context, when you enjoy it is when you have to be most critical of it.
Right.
That's my point.
Right.
Look, these people know how to do this.
Right.
These are talented, beautiful actors. These are, even the white women, as we're going to talk about, who wrote this, they know how to do what they're doing.
Right.
People with the cameras know how to do it. These are talented people. They're not dumb. They're not bad at their job.
Right.
But it's the politics. That's what I'm saying. So that's what we're of course going to be moved. Of course we're going to be wanting to see this. I really, the head of the Oyo, I really responded to that dude. I was like, that's the guy I want to see a movie about. I want to see his story. I want his team. He had for some reason, I get the patriarchy and all of that. His vibe was the one I would, but again, I'm a man and all this other, whatever. But my point is, that's what I was saying even to my own family. I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
But this is why we have to be even more critical.
Exactly.
And then, my youngest was asking, she don't know the full history. She was asking, she was like, wait a minute. So much of it was Black people fighting and killing Black people.
Right.
And I was like, I'm like, that's an aspect of the nuance mongering. Shout out to Professor Taiwo. This is the kind of nuance mongering that I think is important, that yes, there are times when this occurred. But why is this the story that they're telling? Why is this the piece of reality that is being told now? But okay,
and that leads into the deconstruction of the film, and then we'll talk about the formula. So why was this story told? Well, the same reason Black Panther was told. Right? White people conceived it. White people wanted to tell it, and they decided to tell it. Now, I want to emphasize that It's September 19th, 2022. Black people can still not greenlight a Hollywood film.
Not one person. There's literally not one black person that can greenlight.
Not even Barack Obama can greenlight a Hollywood film, right?
Nope.
But a woman who started on ER, a woman who's on NCIS, right?
Oh, I gotta wait till I show you this. Wait. Keep
go
going.
Ahead. No,
Keep
go ahead.
going. No, I'm pulling it up because this is
right. A woman who was on ER for 5 minutes. A woman who's been on NCIS, right? Just one blonde white woman, right? She goes and takes a trip and goes, "Oh, I have an idea." Now, many things that feed and nourish black people sadly come from white people who all of a sudden have an idea, right?
I hope this is comical, by the way. No, Spike Lee cannot greenlight a film.
Oh, give me a break. No. Spike Lee can make his own films, good or bad. He can get funding for distributors on his own films. But no, we're talking about green lighting. We're talking about taking a $50 million to $200 million budget that you don't have and them giving it to you and saying, do what you want, right? So anyway, to go back to this, so this idea of this kind of white woman or white person, liberal white person, doing something that feeds and nourishes black people, this is not a new idea. I mean, Sesame Street was created at a cocktail party where some white liberals sat down, led by a white woman named Joan Cooney, and said, well, we should have something for black and brown preschool children, right? And they went and hired the black actors and all of that. And, they never had any power. I mean, it's always their conception because it's always their money and it's always their conception that matters, right? So Miss Bello, I'm assuming everybody involved in here has good intentions, right? So Miss Bello has an idea. She goes and pitches Viola Davis the idea. Viola Davis, of course, who came to stardom, coming out of the August Wilson camp too. So it was really hard for me to watch her go from August Wilson to playing a maid. But what do you do in Hollywood, right? You're either maid. If you're a white woman, you have to have a nude scene, right? A graphic sex scene or nude scene. I mean, there are things that women have to do, right? I mean, we look at Margot Robbie. She had a very nude sex scene in The Wolf of Wall Street that put her on the map. Now she's a big star, right? So there are things women have to do. So Viola Davis plays a maid and then, moves her way up the ladder to where she can be pitched this movie. So then Maria Bello goes to another blonde white woman and they go and write.
Oh, but I want to show you this real quick.
No, go ahead.
Because when you scroll down the IMDb page,
sure.
Because I know Bello as an actress. I've seen her in a number of films. She's talented. She's got as you see here, she's got a lot of credits to her name.
Yeah.
I saw McFarland USA. I saw she was in it'll come up here in a second, I'm sure. But she was in Thank You for Smoking, which I think is an excellent film.
Oh yeah.
She was in The Cooler, which I think is an excellent film. So she knows how films are made. But this is the point that you said something you made earlier as we get down to her this is her one writing credit.
Right. Now,
No,
but it gets worse. But it gets worse, Dr. Ball, because so these two white women write this screenplay, right? And so they pitch and they pitch and they pitch. They start pitching in, according to Wikipedia, they started pitching, I think, in 2015. When do they get it approved? They get it approved in 2019. They get it approved after Black Panther becomes the top movie of 2018. Dana Stevens, yep, there's the other co-writer. And again, I believe all of the people involved here had very good intentions, right? So the film is greenlit basically as a result of Black Panther. And they start making this film. So I'm not against having Serafina as an entry character, right? I am against Serafina's story being the entire story. That is a Hollywood trope. We make the entry character and we do the whole point of view of the movie from the entry character, and the entry character grows and develops, etc. But the film should have been about Dahomey, its relationships with other African nations. I won't call them tribes because I know the decolonized word is nation, right? Their relationship with other African nations and their relationship with the slave trade and the complexities of that. But instead of that, we get a soap opera and a badly done soap opera. This is where I think I kind of match your point. Because not only is it a soap opera, it's a badly done one, right? I told my oldest nephew, who's a filmmaker, I said, remember that whole trope, that's really played out about the twins and each of the twin has a missing part of the necklace, right? And they meet years later and they match up the necklace and they go, oh, we're brother and sister, right? It's one of the oldest tropes. They have that trope in here, right? It's not a good film where, and by the way, I saw The Woman King in very black, very pro-black Newark, New Jersey, right? We're cultural nationalists. We support anything black. We some of us use political analysis, but the masses of us, our political analysis is it black, right? So I'm in the theater, and all of a sudden, 10 minutes before the movie starts, about 30 black women come in, 30. And they're between the ages of 30 and 80. And I'm like, oh, wow, let's see how this goes, right? And so, they're cheering, they're clapping, everything. But you're in a movie that's not well done when the plot twist happens and then the whole crowd yells out the rest of the movie, right? I'm in there and all of a sudden, like, you're seeing the plot and all of a sudden you get the flashback of the rape scene, right? Then all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, all of a sudden you get, oh, I'm adopted. So everybody, the whole crowd of my movie theater goes, that's her
Not that
daughter.
I'm adopted. I'm your right. I'm sorry. Right. You're right. I'm your adopted daughter. Right.
So like the audience I was with, you've seen, black people see millions of movies. So like, they basically put together two huge signs that said, oh, look at this, plot twist, right? And I'm like, no subtlety, no nothing, right? So not only does the whole crowd call out the rest of the movie, right? But then you see the whole thing with the
well, they go back to it like they do it relative to something like a film like Precious. They do it well. Yeah. So the repeated visits to the rape scene, and there are repeated visits, are done in a way that what's happening, but it's not in the most egregious graphic way.
Yeah,
but what's going on.
She thought, put it this way, that character thought she was being raped. Put it that way, right?
Well, she says it.
Right.
She later tells her daughter, I was raped, and tells her daughter, you're a product of rape. Exactly. And her daughter later apologizes for it.
Right.
And then they kind of have a scene that doesn't make any. See, I don't want to get too much into that because I'm not but the scene doesn't make any. The reactions don't make any sense.
Now,
and how many times are you gonna how many times are they gonna do something happened with the editing? Like how many times does something happen and then the Viola Davis runs away to solitude to cry off and by herself, and then the daughter runs off by herself to cry, and then they come back again, and then they go back, and I'm like, what is going on here? Anyway, but
I think the filmmakers were trying to show that they were genetically bound, right? They were genetically troublemakers, right? Because the daughter runs away.
Oh, I know, I get that part. I'm talking about, but the way you're right. Okay, I get that. Okay.
See? But see, it's so obvious. Now I know what you're saying, because what you're really saying is it's so obvious, right? This film is done in such an obvious way, right? So so they do the whole thing with the shark tooth in the shoulder, and I was sitting there thinking, A, that's the cliche of the twins with the locket, and B, how did she not get infected with that? Like if you got an actual bone in your come on, she would have gotten infected a long time ago. Come on, they would have taken that thing out. But see, they needed all of this to have this kind of visceral, emotional connection that they knew Black audiences would respond to, right? So I don't know if I agree with you that the only positive image was Malik. I mean, Malik was swole, the meet cute was really cute. Of course, him being naked.
What other positive male character is there?
What about the king? You don't like King Finn? King Finn from Star Wars?
King Finn from Star Wars is a positive?
Finn from Star Wars.
He comes across as patriarchal, simple, easily manipulated, shady. I don't know if I saw him as a good guy. I don't know. And I'm not saying Malik is a good guy. I'm saying he is depicted as the best male we get.
Right.
And that's why he's the love interest.
Right.
She smiles at him as she's walking away.
Right.
He, you know, he saves his brothers. You know, he you know, usually like even Haile Garima in Sankofa depicts mixed folks as treacherous and does the old stereotypical trope that we're the sellouts. And at least here, we're not the sellouts. But I'm just saying is that was like, there's a sister, I invited her on, who was in a back and forth on Ray Winbush's Facebook page, saying that she used the word misandry, that the film goes that far. Now, I don't know about all that, but you know, I did feel like, damn, I mean, I get it. This is a Black woman film, or supposed to be a Black woman film, but wow, I was like the only good guy is this dude, the half enslaver or whatever you want to call it. I was like, but
you know, one little side note that's not a side note. I was very proud to see Sheila Atim in this movie. Because Sheila Atim had King Finn, absolutely. I was very happy to see Sheila Atim in this movie. Sheila Atim is a sister who plays the confidant to the king, to the woman king, right? To the general. And by the way, I thought it was very interesting the way the LGBT issue was done, because it was done very subtly. Now they were subtle with that. They because
I actually liked that.
What Viola Davis said, because you remember she said to the trainees, you cannot take a husband.
Right.
She didn't say you couldn't take a lover. She said you couldn't take a husband. Right.
And in a number of the articles that I read, some of which are linked in the show description, all of that was kind of, you know, dealt with suspect in reality in the first place. This idea that the women were supposed to stay celibate and, you know, not be with whoever. Like there was all kinds of stuff going on. Obviously, you tell people not to have sex, they're going to have sex.
And you know, the other thing was the Enoch. You know, the Enoch was supposed to represent, I guess, the LGBT. You know. That, you know,
the eunuch, he was supposed to represent the LGBTQ community, and I got that. But the way it came across to me, and I'm happy to be checked on this as well, was like we don't need to make an issue of it. It's obvious, but it's part of the natural flow of our society. Maybe they could have done more to show more. As opposed to the one character. But again, it was all formulaic. We have the one LGBTQ character who's sort of the wise ass in the office. We have the child overcoming something, learning something about their special connection to the leader. You know, again, the sergeant character gets killed. There was so many of those. The trope. Anyway,
I want to get back to that, but I want to just do the Sheila Atim thing because you'll enjoy this part. Now, in a braver film, Sheila Atim would probably have been the general's lover, right? So they didn't do it that way. They did it as, you know, she was the confidant. Now, here's why I was happy for Sheila Atim. Sheila Atim is like almost one of the leads of this film, and I was so happy for her because in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, she is one of the mystic arts practitioners under Wong. Wong is now the Sorcerer Supreme. And she has a magic Negro role in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Her only purpose is to show up in one scene as one of the mystic artists, and then she dies for Wong. She literally says, like, Wong is about to sacrifice himself for a deranged Wanda, right? Wanda Maximoff, who's become the Scarlet Witch, right? Who's now an evil character, right? And Wong's about to sacrifice himself, and she pops up and says, "No, Wong," and she rubs his face. She gives you the impression that they had a romantic relationship, and then she goes to die, right? And just crumbles in the dust, literally. And I'm sitting here going, "Damn, Magic Negro stuff again in 2022? Come on!" So like, I was so happy for her because I was like, okay, now she's got a real role. I was also happy to see.
Is that a real role?
No, I'm saying this role compared to that.
I'm saying, is this a real role?
Compared to that. And see, this is where we're at. This is the problem that we have, right? This is the problem, as Norman Rockwell called it, this is the problem we must all live with, right? That we go from a bad role created by whites to a mediocre role created by whites, right? And go ahead.
No, I was just going to go ahead, because I got so much.
I agree with you in terms of all of these tropes. I mean, of course, Mel Gibson is, trademarked. I'm joking here. The Braveheart speech, right? Every war movie has to have a Braveheart speech, right? So of course, Viola did, and I'm like, might as well just put up a sign that said the Braveheart speech, right? So like, there's not one trope.
But the speech, but to make that important comparison to the Braveheart speech, it's equally historically inaccurate. Just like the William Wallace character was mythologized by Mel Gibson to great effect. And by the way, Braveheart is a way better movie.
I agree.
Braveheart is a way better movie.
I agree.
So it's that's kind of stuff that pisses me off. Like the white folks, you can make a good movie,
right,
when you want to. So, but when it comes to making an African movie, you can't, or refuse to, or are incapable of, perhaps. But the speech that she gives, that Braveheart speech that she gives, is again, Naniska, as I was reading about, was real, but lived roughly a century later. The king, as King Finn depicted in this film, never abandoned slavery, nor of course did his father, as they point out in this film, but they try to make it seem like the son did better. No, he did not. He never did. And in fact, Naniska gets killed on the battlefield 100 years later by the French, who are there to finally wipe out and take over and fully colonize their former base of operations for enslavement, having taken it over at some point from the Portuguese. So the whole time, Dahomey is raiding, enslaving, using these African women to conquer other Africans, sell them off, which is again why I think this film would be selected. This story would be selected for green lighting, not only because of Black Panther, but because it follows the line of Black Panther's logic, which is we have a special independent African community that's better than the others, that only uses its betterness against other Africans.
I call it Black Panther 1.5.
So they they were explicit, as you pointed out, to say Black Panther was the what made this film possible. They had been trying to get it done for a long time, but they couldn't get it greenlit until they saw Black Panther would be a major hit, and then they could just do the same thing with the whole other story. So as I was telling my children, you may have been moved by this, but this is why I've done so much and done the best I could to give you nicknames after real, albeit indigenous women in South America who did actually lead actual armies against the actual colonizers. That's why you have already been exposed to Assata Shakur, Sophia Bakari, the women in the Young Lords. These are real African women warriors who fought against actual colonizers, not against other Africans. So like, you can be moved because that's what movies are going to do. I took you, I put you in that theater. I made you succumb, susceptible to it. They're going to get us. I was moved. all of it. I get it.
It's the reason why I call movies, right?
That's why they call them movies.
There it is.
So okay. Anyway. I still got more. I still got more.
Go.
I'm
out.
We haven't even got to the Lupita part yet.
Keep going. Come back to that. I'm out.
So one thing I just wanted to show very quickly, and I'll skip some of the other ones that are linked in the show description. I just wanted to give one example of what I'm talking about, that even the general reviews are having to acknowledge, as this one did, that this one here, the History versus Hollywood, historyversushollywood.com. But it even has to acknowledge that in answering the question, how accurate is the woman king, we learned that in the real life, the Dahomey are much more the villains than the heroes. So I just you know, they're not the heroes. They're not, you know. All right, so that was one thing. But then I really did get into this guy. So when I saw, and I think I got this from Geechee, that Professor Winbush, all due respect, said that this was his favorite review, and I did see him post this on Twitter and Facebook. The complicated history behind the Woman King in Time magazine. Famous, of course, of the Luce family, and I'm never gonna, give up on the old stuff. They had both Mussolini and Hitler as men of the year at one point. So let me just pull up my highlights here real quick. So from his favorite review, but in the 19th century West Africa, at the height of their power, the reputation preceded them, fierce and unparalleled. Okay. I think it's something which even today should be considered revolutionary, what Chikun says of the women warriors, because all the training that it took, all the preparation it took, it's actually something that happened. It's not made up. So this is the guy, Leonard Wanchikun, who is a professor of politics and international affairs at Princeton University and was the historical advisor on the film. So his point here is that, and this I thought was interesting, that the Dahomey had, unlike all, and this was a point that he doesn't focus on, that I would like to see in other scholarship. I'm sure it does get focused on. He says one of the things that was interesting about the Dahomey is that they were one of the only African nations to have a standing army, a permanent standing army. And he points out that all other armies would be disbanded after a conflict, which I always thought was particularly very, very African. Like, we're going to have our squabble and then we got to go back to regular society. Like the idea of a permanent army is for people who have imperial design, is sort of what I would think. So like, it's like, so on the one hand, you could say, and then as Wanchikun points out, and others who talk about this point out, this is what attracted Europeans to be fascinated by the Dahomey, and particularly these African women warriors. Not just that they were women, but that they had a standing army. They were impressed by this. And I was like, of course, conquerors would be impressed by this facet of another. Like, of course they would.
Did you think the film did a good job of showing that when Africans took other Africans for slaves, they were taking other ethnic groups? Because because the whole issue was, well, it's not our group, and then they had to evolve, supposedly, to say no, if they're African, they are our group. Did you think the movie did a good job of explaining that?
I think it did, actually. I mean, I think it made it clear that they were in conflict with other ethnicities. They were in conflict with other nations, that they saw themselves as superior to them. But then they pointed out, as the one sister said, once you go through the training of the Ajuli, I'm not saying that right either. Once you go through the training of these African women warriors, you become them. You become you become them. So I thought in some way, if you know the history at all, you could say, well, this points to some of the traditions in Africa where even the enslaved were brought in and became part of the community and weren't enslaved in the ways Europeans and Arabs did. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, I thought they did do that pretty well. But what they didn't do well, as I've read in some of these articles, is that the Dahomey not only enslaved others, but they would end up enslaving some of their own and selling their own off. Because in part, Wachikon's work, who he himself comes from Benin. So he is a descendant of these communities. And that's part of what his research interests would led him into this direction. And part of his work is in research that assesses the ongoing impact, negative impact on trust among African people in today's politics, based on previous histories of enslavement and Africans enslaving other Africans. And he's produced studies measuring or attempting to measure the amount of trust remaining in an African community based on its proximity to the coast and its proximity to the trade in enslaved Africans. So, of course, I think he says this becomes his primary. I'm going to get to that. His primary, what he calls umbrella approach to understanding why Africans, in many cases, are underdeveloped today. He does not approve of the colonial, European imperial approach. His approach is Africans have trust issues and some other internal conflict, which is again why I would think it was logical that he would be an advisor to a film like this that wants to emphasize intra-African turmoil as the cause of Pan-African strife.
And what's interesting with that is that you have Ngugi wa Thiong'o, right, who both talks about the internal and external problems, right? But you have a Wole Soyinka who focuses almost entirely on the internal, right? So there is a serious African dialogue about we can't get it together. But at least Ngugi explains why, because we've been colonized and we're still mentally colonized. As Ngugi points out, Kenya still uses the British standardized education system. The Kenyans have never developed their own educational system, right? So you're talking about people who produced the Mau Mau, who, by the way, Queen Elizabeth presided over their torture and destruction, right? Since we're bringing that up, since we're talking about the other queen. But they're still to this day using the British educational system. So they really have not dealt with this brainwashing aspect.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, so he points out this issue about the standing army that I talked about. And as historical advisor, to the point you raised, he made sure that they were seen as some beyond just a stereotypical primitive tribe. Let's see. The sheer existence of the Agoji was an anomaly. European visitors referred to them as the Dahomey Amazons. This was what attracted their attention. They only briefly, as it says, I think I went past it. Right, they only briefly ended participation in the slave trade in 1852, just briefly.
Wow.
And that was temporary. So they never stopped. That was Wanchicone himself observed progressive gender roles in the region. Growing up in Benin, he noticed gender equality all around him, from children playing together at a young age to mixed gender cultural groups to women's involvement in economic activities. Those inclusive gender norms date back at least as far as Dahomey. So let's see. But the Agoji and the Dahomey are not without complexity, and the woman king Naniska experiences firsthand the horrors of slavery and works to convince King Gezo to stop participating in the slave trade, or at least to end the tributary status of the Dahomey to the Oyo Empire. But as investigative journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones pointed out on Twitter before the movie came out, the Dahomey did derive some of their wealth from participating in the slave trade. The director, Prince Blythewood, who I apologize, misidentified, said, "We are not going to shy away from anything, but also we're telling a part of the story which is about overcoming and fighting for what's right. And I think we got it right." Now, they did tell that story, but it's just not historically accurate. So, and I don't understand why.
It's not nuanced.
And I don't understand why that couldn't have been put in the context of them fighting against the French, which ultimately, or any other African rebellion against the institution of enslavement imposed by Arabs or Europeans. Why couldn't that be the center, the stage?
If Garima or if Dewey Dash had done this exact same movie, it would have been so different. It would have been about the complexities of African societies and the irony and the racism of the slave trade and being in the slave trade. But instead, we get a Hollywood formula about a mother and a daughter, right? And don't go out with that boy, right? And it's just so sad because there's so much that could have been done with this movie that people just decided not to try because it was better to do a Hollywood movie.
Right.
And again, this may be why Daughters of the Dust and Sugarcane Alley and all these, kind of Sankofa and all these kind of movies are kind of cult classics. I mean, we have our criticisms of them, of course, but they're cult classics compared to what Hollywood produces because the people who are actually producing the former movies are decolonized. And here we have the tension between the colonized and the colonizer. I'm not talking about the Arabs and the Dahomey. I'm talking about the white writers and the black producers and directors.
This this line here struck me as more evidence of the whitening of the approach. This line here, ending the story, is what I think we've always been encouraged to hear when the context has been Europeans. So it's like an updating of the Mantan Manifesto to defend the selection of the Dahomey and this attempt to play on women being misrepresented and Black women in particular being misrepresented and underrepresented in this way is explained here. A society can be forward-thinking and advanced in one regard while causing immeasurable harm in another. That is the line that I think is meant for us to take away, not only for this film, but in the way we are looking at the film's ultimate progenitors and creators, that is white society, that is constantly being asked to say, look, we may have enslaved you and tortured you and we may abuse you, and capitalism may itself also be bad, but look at all the beauty it produces. So we may cause some immeasurable harm, but look at all the forward thinking that we offer you. And anyway, so I thought that was a revealing line in
Dr.
that
Jared
review.
Ball would say, so you're telling me that slavery is okay because it produced a August Wilson who produced a Viola Davis?
Hey, I mean, without slavery, we look. Fanon said it. We don't get blues. We don't get. I don't get my boom bap. I don't get go-go music. So like it's but there's a little bit more I wanted to get to in terms of the Wanchicon scholar guy who's the advisor to the film, because again I think that I did do this deep dive into all of these and there were a couple of things that I took notes on from his articles that I don't know if I'll pull them up here, but I can make them available if people want them. But I just think that they're important to note. As I said,
we need more detail than Chuck D's King in Chief had a big beef because of that. I grit my teeth, right? We just need more details. So go right ahead. Now let's go into the rabbit hole.
It's just that I was like, well, let me look at this guy's work a little bit, and so I one of the I do appreciate about being in academia is access to these research portals. So I did pull up a couple of his articles. And again, I don't pretend to have be an expert on his work or anything to that level. But I just thought some things were of interest. One, it's not only his Ivy League background, but a lot of his work is not related to the specifics of Dahomey or Benin history or even African history more broadly speaking. A lot of it is about economics and politics. A lot of it is co-authored. A lot of it is written with white academics of the Ivy League variety. And he reaches certain conclusions that I think fit well with what I think this movie is doing, or at least as I interpret what this movie is doing. So it made perfect sense. So, for instance, in this one article that I will show here, let me just see. Let's see. Political distortion.
While you're
sure, go ahead.
I was about to say, while you were finding the article, The Woman King is #1 at the box office with a record $19 million for the budget of that film. It's made $19 million, so it will make its money back, and it is considered a hit movie. So I just wanted to bring that in before you before you continue.
No, and like Spike Lee has been saying for a long time, if you want to support Black films, you have to go out and see them immediately. And Viola Davis said the same thing, saying if you don't come and see it, then you're sending a message that Black women can't lead the box office globally, end quote. Which I think is good marketing, but I think unfair to say that if I don't go see this film. I went out and bought 4 whole tickets. For our family. We went and supported the film, but I think that's a little unfair to say you don't support Black women if you don't see the film right away. But anyway, political distortion, state capture, and economic development in Africa. They write, however, when it comes to Africa, the explanations for its economic development are mostly focused on long-run structural factors, in particular mechanisms like colonial and pre-colonial institutions, deep-rooted historical factors, and ethnic diversity have been proposed as the key explanations for slow economic growth in Africa. So they do a review of literature that does take that approach. Certainly people like me would be in that broad camp. But as they say here, we find that such African-centered and historical arguments are limited in their ability to explain key facts and narratives about current African economic performance. In this paper, we argue for researchers and policymakers to focus on political distortions to address the nature of economic development and growth in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere, and to move away from placing disproportionate emphasis on historical arguments. A political distortion is any situation in which a special interest group can direct economic development towards its own exclusive ends rather than towards increasing general welfare. Narrow political interests of office holders, state capture. In other words, what they're saying here, this is a way I interpret it, this is a fancy, nuanced, new way of saying the problem in Africa is corrupt African leadership, tribalism, not the historical concerns of European imperialism, not the historical concerns of Western dominance and neo-colonialism, and none of that is capitalism. None of that is the issue.
Which would make sense if it was 300 years from colonialism and not 50.
Or if, as we just discussed in the last hour, if you don't have all your bases controlling African militaries, if you aren't controlling African economies, so whether it's 300 or 50 years, if those relationships still exist, it's relevant. So my point is, and for good or for bad, I read way more than just what I'm showing here. But the point is, this is their umbrella concept. Not the umbrella concept, again, that we talked about last hour of Pan-African, United States of Africa under scientific socialism. Not a radical Pan-Africanism or a radical nationalist consciousness. It is their umbrella concept for the advisor, the academic advisor to the woman king, is that political distortions are created by selfish Africans working for their own individual self-interest as opposed to the good of the collective welfare. Put differently, or said differently, neo-colonial imposed puppet regimes are there not to help the welfare of Africans, but to help expropriate and extract and exploit resources off the continent for Europe and the West. That would create those kinds of political distortions, but that isn't, as they said a few pages ago, they want to move away from placing disproportionate emphasis on historical arguments. So again, we could go on and on. They go on to talk about the rise of democracy all around the continent, the rise of average GDP. And as I've talked about in my own work, GDP does not measure inequality in a country. So GDP could double, could triple, could quadruple, and you would still end up with the situation where a handful of people do well, like a bougie neo-colonial African ruling elite, and the masses of people would do less well, as we just showed is the case on the anniversary of the assassination of Steve Biko. South Africa is in a worse economic condition than it was under the height of apartheid.
And they have corrupt political leadership in South Africa with the ANC, but just because they have
and why is Botswana highlighted? Because of its relationship. They don't go into it because of Botswana's Why is Botswana so peaceful? Because of their relationship with the Beers and diamonds. My bad.
Right. No, but I was just about to say with the ANC has become corrupt, and it's really sad. But they were very close to the Afrikaners. They knew them well, and they knew how to imitate them. When they got in power, they knew how to imitate them. And we're not dealing with the fact that all of these African political structures are structures that were left by the colonists, left by the people who raided the country. So of course those structures can't result in any liberation.
Now, there was another article that I had found, I think it's linked in the show description, titled Groundbreaker, in the Finance and Development section of the IMF magazine, the International Monetary Fund magazine, published in 2016, where Wanchakan's work is praised, and he's given a lot of attention for his work. It does discuss his work related to Dahomey and this issue of trust. And I took a note here. It says Dahomey was a major supplier of slaves to European slave traders during the 17th and 18th centuries. So many Africans were put in bondage from Dahomey that it was called the Slave Coast. Wanchakan says the legacy of slavery is pervasive. He remembers when he was growing up hearing friends joking that this person will sell you or make you disappear. Those attitudes seem to bespeak a general societal condition that puzzled Wanchakan, a lack of trust between people who sometimes had lived decades together as friends, colleagues, and neighbors. Intuitively, he said he thought that this must have been some connection with the slave trade, and later he became captivated with that idea. The book that they're talking about that he wrote is a follow-up to an education and social mobility project that led to his 2015 paper published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics that showed how missionary schools a century ago led to the education of a future elite and profoundly affected the structure of society and the economy in Benin after independence. Missionary schools still play an important role in Africa, but I don't think anybody has realized their enormous significance for building what economists call upper tail human capital, says Schleifer. That's another person's written. So my point is, as I understand it, and I'm interpreting it, maybe unfairly, maybe over reducing it, is that Wanchakan's work is focused on, again, maybe it could be said the lasting impacts of what Europeans did, but the ways that Africans perform them against themselves is his primary focus. And he says, as I just showed you, they want to reduce the emphasis of the historical past and maybe its lingering relationships in terms of their effect. So that's why I think it's, again, he's perfect. He seems perfect for this film. Not only his Benin and Dahomey history, his background, but his very Western approach, I think, to economics and a preferred focus and emphasis on Africans, mistreating other Africans, and put together with what we've already talked about and the writers and so on and so forth. It leads us to the film we got. And then the only other thing that I have left is this short discussion about Lupita Nyong'o and her apparent decision and why she was not in the film playing this character.
Please talk about that, because I wasn't able to finish the documentary. I've only seen a few minutes, but please talk about that, because I think it's extremely significant.
Sure. So she did this documentary that I will let's see. I wanted to pull. Let's see. She did this documentary here. Let's see. Let me. And again, I struggle with, there's a lot of contradictions here. I'll say it that way, because let me open this here this way. And then so I can at least just show. All right, this is the documentary that she made, Warrior Women, with Lupita Nyong'o. And the film, so apparently she had been cast to play Maui, the daughter of Viola Davis's character. She was very excited. She said she had just been, as she talks about in the documentary, she had just been in this monster global hit, the Black Panther film, where the Dora Milaje are inspired by these real African women warriors. So now that she had been invited to be in The Woman King, she said, I want to go learn about these women. I want to do a documentary about these women. I want to, learn more. As she does the documentary, she realizes what we've been talking about, that the depiction of the film is not reflective of the reality, and that there's a lot of lasting trauma as a result of of what these African women were sent to do. By the way, a point that I left out, or I forgot to mention in my criticism, for all of this feminism that we're supposed to be getting, remember, these African women were working at the behest of the king. They were in fact considered to be his wives. They were in fact only officially allowed to be physically betrothed to him, if at all. And of course, they were conscripted. These women were conscripted. That was another part that the film doesn't get accurately. The king would send his people out into the towns to find women and girls to be snatched up and brought in to be part of these African women warriors. They were taken from they were not just dropped off at the door as recalcitrant, unsellable daughters by horrible fathers. They were snatched up by the king and forced into this life. Now, they relatively had it better, apparently, given that they were conscripts of the king. They got to live better and eat better, and they did drink liquor, apparently, and all this other kind of stuff. But in addition to that, what Lupita discovered was that she went and met with, for instance, this is a screenshot that I took from the documentary, where she's sitting with someone who is a descendant who talks about how her grandmother was snatched up by the Agoli, or the women warriors, and sold into slavery. So as she's saying here, what the Agoji did was not good at all. And then they have a big moment on camera where they're crying, and Lupita she starts raising questions on camera. I set off to do something here, but now I'm having a different feeling. And in fact, one of her quotes was, she says that these African women warriors were not, quote, a beacon of feminism. They do not. And that, now the contradiction for me is, she says that they don't rise to the level of the myth created in the Black Panther, that the women in the Black Panther film, the Dora Milaje, are better. The real women don't rise to that level. And I think, and the speculation in the press is, that's why Lupita backed out of the film and was replaced here to go back to what she thinks is her better work of being in the Black Panther. In fact, they even go to Ouida, which is depicted in The Woman King. They go to Ouida in Lupita's documentary, where she sees a plaque dedicated to the thousands or millions of people sold to Europeans, in part by the Dahomey and these African women. So,
there was when I came out of the Newark Theater, that, like I said, the 30 women really enjoyed the film. But Dr. Ball, you'll appreciate this. There was one guy who was doing a one-man protest of the film. He was walking up and down Springfield Avenue, where the movie theater is, and he had a megaphone, and the megaphone was attached to a recorded message where he said, "This is not our story." And then I couldn't hear some other things that he said, but then he said, "Wake up, wake up, wake up," in Spike Lee fashion. And he just walked up and down and he repeated it, that message again and again. So there's a lot of conversation that is going to happen as a result of this movie. And again, going back to our elders because remember, our elders grew up with Tarzan, right? They grew up with Jungle Jim. Now we can say they're easily impressed, but this, Dr. Ball, as a media scholar, when you have a 5-channel universe and Tarzan is dominant on a 5-channel universe where 90% of Americans have a television, right? By 1970 something, 90% of Americans have a television, and Tarzan is what's dominant on these small independent channels. That's a lot of programming. Sambo, Little Black Sambo is a lot of programming. These elders had to grow up with that. We did not. Although I do remember watching Johnny Weissmuller's Tarzan. I do remember that. And I do remember wondering, as I say in the introduction to my Black Panther book, I kept wondering why they kept dying, right? Why was their purpose only to bring luggage and to die? And why I could never understand what they were saying, right? So I think the elders
but it's just but it's the same thing I've been arguing. It's just the propaganda, the psychological warfare just gets more sophisticated. What's happening now is worse than ever before and is getting worse. And this is the point I'm getting at, that there are ways to have conversations about African societies, slavery in African societies, the similarities and cavernous differences between slavery and African societies and what Arabs and later Europeans would do. We could do all of that, and we could do it highlighting the Pan-Africanism that we discussed in the first hour under Nkrumah, which was the logical revolutionary response to all of that, not what these reactionary backwards hashtaggers are doing with it. We will take anything of value and turn it against a legit analysis. So that's why it's soda all day here. I'm not saying Africans sold us, so we should turn away, blah, blah, blah. I'm saying we need to understand what slavery was in those societies and what impetus was created, what context was created by Europeans creating that, imposing that on African people. And by the way, it was an absence of Pan-African radicalism that allowed for Europeans to do what they did to the extent that they were able to. So it's not that we should run away from it. We should run more towards it. So anyway.
No, we need a more nuanced portrayal, but we always need a more nuanced portrayal, right? And so our elders are happy with this because they feel it's more nuanced than Tarzan, but we can't be happy with this because it's less nuanced than what we need, and we know what we need. Right. That's the challenge.
There we go. That's the challenge. All right. So that was it. That's it for me, everybody.
That's it for me too.
Now, what I will say is, so Friday is going to be a special edition of I Mix What I Like. We're going to air a pre-recorded conversation between. You're going to get more of me and Dr. Burrows because we're going to go forward with our debate around the previous debate between Lerone Bennett Jr., Eric Foner, and others on the issue of Lincoln. Now, if you remember, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows and I had that little disagreement a couple of weeks ago. We're going to hash out our differences on camera and present that to you all Friday morning as I will be out of town. So we'll reconvene with Geechee and Diallo in the weeks after that. But Dr. Burrows, thank you very much for coming on today, and thank you in advance for the conversation we're about to record for tomorrow for later this week. And
thank you for always providing a decolonized forum.
I struggle with that phrase. I appreciate what you're saying. I always struggle with that kind of approach. But anyway, I don't think there's anything else. The sugar-free soda. Dr. Ball should be examining the contamination of African people, which produced that behavior that was seen in the movie The Oils Wanted to Sell. I think I did address that a little bit. I didn't examine it per se, but I'm saying that's what I'm saying should be done in an actual film that wants to depict this history in a way that isn't working against us. That it would go into that. That's my point. They don't do that really. There are some allusions to it in this film about the French and the Portuguese and Europeans but the emphasis, the focus of the conflict and the antagonism is against African people. And it plays out both physically in the film and I think intellectually, but we need films or figuratively that
reflect our freedom dreams and our discussion of the contradictions of our freedom dreams.
And thank you, Big Teal, and others in the chat. The Paul Robeson show will be October 22nd, live from The Hague. So I look forward to that as well. And a lot of stuff coming up. So stay tuned to the channel, everybody. Make sure you have all the bells and whistles and all of that signed off, and make sure that you like, share, subscribe, and do what you can to help us raise so we can keep delivering those good
message.
And if you got something more to say, definitely put
it in the comments.
And when somebody says, do you think that The Woman King is a revolutionary film? You can say,
no, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
And then your friends can turn to you and say, hey,
it's wrong, bro.
All right, everybody. Thanks again. It's been a lot of fun. Appreciate you all. Thanks a lot. Peace if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like and Beyond. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Let me show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh, man, let me get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh, no. Shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh, my goodness. I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh, my goodness. What's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Tree. I'm taking on 3 of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh, my goodness. Behind the back. Layup. Oh, and did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't gotta look, it's falling. Oh my goodness, this guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe! Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media again. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.